friends. Welcome to another must-see edition of the Stir Podcast, brought to you by Gazelle Media. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin. And here she is, our guest co-host, our must-see movie list generator, author, and entertainment maven, Debbie Baldwin. Hello, Debbie.
Hi, Trish. Happy to be here.
We are happy to have you here.
Happy to be discussing this list today.
I know. And as yours is too, we were just talking about this. This is like one of my favorite film genres.
And we were, as we were just saying, it's really surging back into popularity. It's definitely one of my favorites too. It's my favorite book genre and film genre. And it's, you know, a bit of a forgotten genre that's now kind of making a comeback. So no one's more excited than I am.
And that is, of course, the Whodunit. These mystery movies. And Deb, I know why you're excited, because as an author, you know a thing or two about keeping people in suspense.
Hopefully. And, you know, the structure, a whodunit is so fascinating because if you're like me, and most people I think are, you're immediately eyeballing suspects from the get-go. And you know, like a book or a movie where you go, oh, he did it. And you know right away, and you're just like, oh, it's so disappointing. But a really good whodunit, and of course, Agatha Christie is the master, undisputed, in her novels,
right,
of creating these amazing whodunits where even, years later, you go back and you can reread them and you kind of forget, like,
oh, I love rereading Christie.
How brilliantly she structured it, and how you think, oh, well, there's only a certain number of suspects and it's got to be this or that. But I don't know, she works her magic. And
she sure does. And, you know, you're talking about we as fans of this genre. You know, Deb, I don't know about you, but sometimes I annoy myself when I'm watching movies like this, because I'm like, you know, thinking, stop it. Stop trying to figure it out.
I know,
and just enjoy the movie. Exactly. Yeah. So, you know what I've noticed with the list that you came up with for today, much of these films are set in previous decades, the 50s, the 30s, even the 70s, with a couple of exceptions, of course. Deb, your novel, your first ever novel, False Front, is set in modern day. But what do you think is the appeal to screenwriters when, you know, doing a mystery that they set their stories in the past?
I think the genre suits itself to a period piece. And as when we go over this list, you'll see that whether it's the 70s or the 30s, that kind of, it has a real costume party feel. And I don't know if it's from those games, remember those games that were so popular, that was How to Host a Murder, and, you know, whether it was at the Flapper movie premiere, or, you know, the Roaring Twenties party, or the disco party, or whatever, it suits itself to a distinctive period where each suspect isn't sort of an iconic character. But, you know, a modern whodunit, which I'm in the, you know, doing some crafting of that type of thing, and, you know, it's challenging. You have to give the reader or the viewer enough breadcrumbs so that you can't go, oh, remember that, like, UPS guy who dropped off the package in the
exactly.
first scene? He's the killer.
Right.
You know, then you're cheating people. So you have to give them all the pieces of the puzzle and, you know, hope that they can't quite fit it together until you get to the end of the story, and then they go, oh, you know, fantastic.
Exactly.
That's the goal.
Right.
And there's some movies that do that incredibly well.
Yeah, and, you know, another thing that I noticed, I mean, it's just fascinating when you look at all these movies together, a lot of ensemble cast in these movies.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, I guess we need as many people once the bodies start piling up.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you, you know, the other thing is, you take a movie, and this was always the classic example for me. I don't know why, but the Wesley Snipes movie Murder at 1600.
Yes.
Which is a good movie. It's not on our list, but it was technically a whodunit. When you have a huge celebrity in a minor role in a film, it's just a dead giveaway that they either did it or they have a little bit more of a meatier part than you might be led to believe. And in that film, that's a classic example of that. And so these films, the great thing about a lot of these ensemble casts is there are a lot of really great, well-known names.
Unbelievable,
playing all the parts. So you really have no, indication from the casting who the killer is.
Correct. All right, so I think we've built up enough suspense here. So we're going to begin our list. And we are going to begin our list, Debbie, with a couple of movies based on novels written by, really, as we said, the grande dame of mystery, and that is named Agatha Christie. She wrote the book, this movie that we have coming up, Murder on the Orient Express. She wrote the book in 1934, and the story itself was based on the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby, which happened in 1932. Also apparently inspired by a 1929 incident when the actual Orient Express was stranded in Turkey during a blizzard. And also Dame Agatha herself was stranded on the Orient Express for some time when, there was heavy rainfall and flooding where it was headed, and it washed away part of the track. So that's a lot of source material there. My gosh. And then we're talking about the movie that was released in 2017. There was an original film, but we're talking specifically about this 2017 movie.
Yeah, and with just a quick rundown of the original film, the 1974 version, yes, which was directed by Sidney Lumet and starred, just listen to this cast list. It reads like an Oscar party from the 70s. Lauren Bacall, Martin Balsam, Albert Finney, Ingrid Bergman, Jacqueline Bisset, Sean Connery, Sir John Gielgud, Anthony Perkins, Vanessa Redgrave, and the list goes on.
Correct.
So even the older version is fantastic.
Worth seeing, definitely.
You're a fan of the genre. I think it's actually better than the 2017 remake, but I do love that it's bursting back, and we have one man to thank for that, probably a lot of men or women or people, but Kenneth Branagh, who has a history of finding these little nuggets and remaking them or rethinking them. And he is cast himself in the role of the Belgian detective, Agatha Christie's famous detective, Hercule Poirot. And is sort of the original monk, if you like that TV show. He's an OCD, truth seeker, and he
neurotic and adorable at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. And this modern version stars Branagh and also Penelope Cruz, Willem Dafoe, Judi Dench, Johnny Depp, Derek Jacobi. It's again, all-star cast with this somewhat of a hideous premise. I hate the premise of this movie, although it's necessary for the way the events unfold. And it begins with the murder of a man who is a con artist and is suspected of a terrible crime, which, as you said, is loosely based on the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. And it's an unusual whodunit for Agatha Christie specifically, but in general, it's a very unusual premise. It's a fascinating story, and the investigation is very complex and layered, which is unusual again for that. It deviates from that sort of standard, one of the people in this room shot Mr. Jones. It's a little different than that, and that makes it great and interesting and really kind of turns it on its ear. So yeah, if you don't know the premise, I won't give anything away, because what a way to ruin a good movie.
Exactly.
To know what's going on. So yeah.
Exactly. You know, and we were talking about this ensemble casting. And one of the surprises, and I didn't know about this until I saw the film, is also the appearance of Leslie Odom Jr., who you Broadway fans out there will know him as the Tony Award winning actor from Hamilton. He is the original Aaron Burr, and he actually was cast in this movie just a couple months after he left Broadway to pursue, you know, an even more glamorous, I guess, film career. And so, yeah, I was surprised to see him in this movie, but I was thrilled nonetheless.
Thrilled, exactly, because what a talent, first of all. And he, you know, when you talk about that star quality, he absolutely has it in spades. So I cannot, you know, wait to see him in more stuff, because he's a welcome addition to this cast for sure.
Oh, I think so. And so if you remember the end of this movie, somebody refers to a death on the Nile, mentions to Poirot, and it alludes to his next investigation and bringing us to our next film. In the movie version, of course, if you're familiar with the next film, Death on the Nile, the death occurs while Poirot is already on the boat. But, you know, just creative licensing for the movie. He hears of a death on the Nile. So we're going to go back a couple decades, 1978, and we're talking about Death on the Nile. The story itself was set in 1937.
And yes, and just a quick side note, Kenneth Branagh again will be returning to the role of Hercule Poirot in an upcoming release of the remake of Death on the Nile. I think
Correct.
He's got sink his teeth into all of Agatha Christie's Detective Poirot novels, and that's fantastic. I think it's great.
Which is so thrilling. You know, apparently, Deb, production has wrapped up. We're just waiting for a release date. It was supposed to be released next month, but with everything up in the air about the pandemic, we're just going to have to wait.
Yeah. And the 2020 version stars Armie Hammer and Gal Gadot and Kenneth Branagh returning to the role of Poirot and Annette Bening. So it's, you know, another one that should be fantastic. The original starred Maggie Smith, Angela Lansbury, Bette Davis, Mia Farrow, David Niven. For sure, don't wait for the 2021, because the 1978 version is fantastic.
And of course, Peter Ustinov as Hercule Poirot. My goodness, he was just a delight to watch.
A delight. And he takes umbrage at being accused of being French. He is Belgian.
He's Belgian. Gosh, get that straight.
This is a classic example of how Agatha Christie has you fooled the entire time. You think, oh, it's this one, it's this. No, I know exactly who it is. It's who you least suspect. No, it's who you most suspect. Just enjoy the film. Let this one unfold, because it's such a brilliantly constructed whodunit. It should be the one that when they teach the class, you know, this is the one that they should use as the example. Death on the Nile is fantastic, and I'm sure the 2020 version will be great too.
Oh, I cannot wait. But you know, talking about the original 1970s version, if you are familiar with the story takes place for the most part in Egypt and also aboard that ship. And so when they were shooting in the desert, the heat was a major concern because the temperature highs hovered around 130 degrees, Deb, at its peak. And so they had to work around it. And so makeup call for cast was at 4 a.m. with filming to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, Bette Davis, who's part of the cast, she had mentioned about, you know, the whole experience with shooting this movie in 1978. She had said something like, you know, in the older days, they'd have built the Nile for you. Nowadays, films have become travelogues and actor stuntmen. So, you know, it was kind of a really cool look into what she, you know, when she was a big, huge deal movie star. And then, you know, as she got older and talking about, you know, just the differences in terms of of production techniques. And another thing that I found so cool, so, you know, when they were shooting on the ship, it was really tight quarters and there was really no room for individual dressing rooms. So Betty Davis and Angela Lansbury and Maggie Smith all shared a dressing room. Can you imagine the conversation?
I mean, to be a fly on the wall. Right?
Exactly.
Can you imagine? That's fantastic.
Yeah. Another bit of good news for this movie, if you cannot wait, and if you are, you know, dying of suspense for Kenneth Branagh's version, the original Death on the Nile is actually streaming for free right now on Pluto TV, Pluto, Pluto TV. So yeah, you might as well check it out because it's an excellent film.
Yeah.
Okay, so also streaming, this kind of worked out, on Pluto right now is our next film, and that is the film Clue. And of course, it is based on the very popular board game.
Now, Clue, I have to say, okay, first of all, you know, not every whodunit needs to be a serious film.
Yeah.
From Who Framed Roger Rabbit to, you know, Clue.
Yes.
Which I cannot imagine putting creating a cast with Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Martin Mull, Eileen Brennan, Leslie Ann Warren, who am I forgetting? Christopher Lloyd, and not having an absolute knockdown, drag out comedy.
Exactly.
This film misses the mark a bit. However, it is weirdly entertaining, and I think it's gotten more entertaining over time. I waited in line in New York City to see this movie. I was so excited. I loved the board game. I love whodunits. I loved every person in the cast. It did this very strange, they did this very strange, very gimmicky thing with this film, which is still the case. They offered 3 different possible endings.
Yes.
Option A, option B, and option C. So you would either you could go see the movie 3 times, or you could talk to your friend who saw B and you saw A, and it was almost.
So I missed this in the theater. Did they actually give you a choice which ending you wanted to see?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And it was stupid. I think it was a big mistake. I don't like alternate endings in any film scenario. If you are the screenwriter and the production team, give us your vision. I don't want to, you know, my role is to observe your vision, your piece of art, and enjoy it. It was just a weird little thing, but you know, it was a jokey movie. It was based on a board game. I think it looked like the actors all had fun, although there's a component to this film that's almost frustrating. Like, the actors have been a bit hamstrung by the script. You kind of wish that the director had let them all off their leashes.
With actors of that caliber, yes, exactly.
Yes, and to see what happened. So it's not a great movie, but it's an entertaining movie.
Well, and definitely a perfect fit for this genre.
Absolutely. And, structured exactly like the quintessential whodunit.
And so apparently for the DVD, the 3 endings are included, so you won't have to choose. And also, I think for showings on TV and on cable, they provide you with the 3 endings. So Deb, did you know that a readaptation was announced for this movie in 2016? And we're told that the movie is currently in pre-production, and I'm really interested to know whether they're gonna go with this, you know, different ending gimmick again, or if they're gonna do something different.
I have to say, like, I've always kind of shouted this from the rooftops. Don't remake a great movie. Like, don't remake Casablanca. It's perfect.
It's perfect.
Remake a shitty movie for sure. Like, absolutely remake Clue. Like, there's so much potential there that went untapped in the original that, you know, you're handing the director a great premise that underperformed on a silver platter. So great. I can't wait to see what they do with it.
Exactly. So we will see. That is To be determined. All right, so our next movie is from 1993, and it's a Woody Allen film. It is Manhattan Murder Mystery, starring Woody Allen, Angelica Houston, Alan Alda, and Diane Keaton.
And this is a great movie. I think it might have, a lot of people might have missed their, Woody Allen radar, because it's not one that kind of leaps to mind when you think of Woody Allen
No,
films,
not really.
but it's Woody Allen going back to his roots, of his comedy roots. It's definitely a comedy. It is a classic murder mystery. He is, in the film, he's married to Diane Keaton, and as always, they are a fabulous on-screen duo. Their complementary neuroses are perfect. They're comedy magic.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yes.
They have older neighbors in their Manhattan apartment building, and the wife dies very suddenly, and Diane Keaton's character begins to suspect foul play. The husband is a little too cheery. The wife's death was a little too, suspicious.
Yes.
And some things are not adding up. And so she decides she's going to do a little investigatory work of her own. And it kind of unfolds from there. She has a friend who's played by Alan Alda, who's encouraging her to snoop. Woody Allen, in the unlikely role of the stable, rational husband,
he was supposed to be rational in this one.
Discouraging her from pursuing this cockamamie scheme. But as you can imagine, she pulls on the thread, and a lot starts to unravel. So it's a very entertaining, interesting, funny, great Woody Allen movie. It's a great movie. But,
it is hilarious. The script is hilarious.
Yes.
So, Deb, did you know that the female lead role that Diane Keaton had was written for Mia Farrow, who, of course, was Woody Allen's partner. But it was right around that time that relationship went kaput.
Yeah.
And so the script was revised.
Yeah. I didn't, it wasn't at the front of my mind, but now that you say it, my memory is refreshed. I remember when it all happened. It was when Woody Allen had the affair with Mia Farrow's adopted child, Sunyi Previn.
Yes.
And I
right
believe
around that
Woody
time.
Allen and Sunyi are still married. But it obviously, when your paramour is having an affair with your daughter, it tends to drive a wedge into the relationship. So Mia Farrow and Woody Allen parted ways, and Diane Keaton stepped in to take over the role.
Well, too, in a little dig to his ex, Woody Allen had said that he rewrote the script to make it funnier because, according to him, it suited Diane Keaton more because she was the funnier actress. A little bit of shade there. Yeah. But so Keaton and Allen have worked in 8 films together. This is the only film in which they have a child together. And you know who the child was, Deb? Do you remember?
I don't.
It was Zach Braff.
Oh.
So that's a little nugget of
that's great. And then you see his face, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. All right. So this next film also is from the same year, from 1993. It was one of the top grossing films of that year. And it is the tale of Dr. Richard Kimball, Harrison Ford in the title role, Tommy Lee Jones as that tenacious U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard, for which he won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. And we're, of course, talking about The Fugitive.
And this is where the Whodunit strays into the area of action. And The Fugitive is a great film. If you haven't seen it, it's an immediate must-see. It's one of the best films you're ever going to watch. It's smart, it's entertaining, it's gripping every minute. Harrison Ford is a doctor in Chicago, and his wife is murdered, he claims, by a one-armed man who he fights with when he interrupts the crime. And no one believes him, and he is arrested and convicted of murdering his wife. And then he manages to escape custody, hence the title. And so he is on the run. Tommy Lee Jones is the U.S. Marshal tasked with bringing him back into custody, and Harrison Ford is determined to figure out who killed his wife. And it's a great little mystery. You sort of forget that, you get all caught up in the sewer chase and the waterfalls and the, car chases. And there's so many great heart-pounding moments in the film. And the supporting cast of Tommy Lee Jones's sort of crew in the U.S. Marshal's office with Joe Pantoliano and an amazing cast. And but it's a great whodunit, and it's a great mystery that gets solved slowly but surely throughout the course of the film. And it's a great film on many levels.
Oh yeah, and when I saw it on your list, it was one of those movies I immediately, put on my mental list as movie to definitely rewatch, because I remember how much fun it was to see in the theater, and such a thrill ride it was. Okay, so for our next movie, we're going to move on to 1997, but this movie was set in the 1950s. And again, talk about another A-list cast of actors: Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, Kim Basinger, Danny DeVito, Kevin Spacey, James Cromwell, and definitely noirish. And you'll notice that with a lot of these whodunit movies, that they have this noirish appeal and noirish look to them.
Yes, the film noir. This is a classic kind of reinvention of that. It's a story of three police detectives who are all very different. Russell Crowe plays one whose name is White, who's sort of an enforcer, and Exley is played by Guy Pearce, who's the snotty kiss up with career ambitions.
He's like the golden boy of the police.
Golden boy.
Yeah.
And but a good honest cop.
Yeah.
And then the third is the Kevin Spacey character, who's a little more of a hotshot. He's a consultant on, what would be like Law and Order now.
Right.
And they are called in to investigate a murder at a coffee shop, and where a former police detective was killed, and a woman who is the plot is very complicated, but well worth it, even if you have to watch it twice.
Yeah.
The acting is fantastic. We've got Kim Basinger, who is a young woman in the movie, who is a prostitute who bears a very strong resemblance to the actress, the movie star Veronica Lake.
Yeah.
If you remember, she had the hair that covered one eye,
right,
famously. And the police investigating pull up the rock to discover the dark underbelly of corruption and drug trafficking. I mean, there's just a lot going on, and there's every time you get to the next scene, there's another layer of complexity that's been added. But man, this is a good, smart, interesting film, and brilliantly acted.
Yes, and so when I did some research into what a film noir actually is, that is what it is. It's supposed to be complex.
Yes.
The look, very stark in terms of lighting, cinematography, but also in the storytelling, you've got different layers, like you said, and that all contributes to that particular genre of film. So this was very cool. So, the film was set in the 1950s, and during that time, the buildings in LA were required to not be taller than City Hall in Los Angeles. And so what the filmmakers did was the cameras were angled to make sure you don't see the buildings that were, of course, taller than City Hall. Cool. So yeah, that was just very fascinating to learn. And another thing, if you are a fan of this movie, and a lot of us are, last month, Deb, did you hear there was word that a sequel was in the works?
I had not heard that.
Yes, and so the
That's
sequel
interesting.
is supposedly going to be set in the 1970s, so a couple decades later. Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe are attached to the project, reprising their roles. There was also talk, sadly, about the actor Chadwick Boseman, the uber talented actor we lost this year. He was also involved. So we'll just have to see what becomes of the film. But, just really exciting to hear that there's a sequel in the works.
Very cool. And, this is not the only time Russell Crowe appears on this list. And it's just a reminder of what an incredible talent he is.
Oh, I agree.
He went through, that period with Gladiator and The Insider and Beautiful Mind, where he was just getting these back-to-back Oscar nominations, and then had a little bit of a fall from grace. But man, can that guy crawl inside the skin of a character. And I mean, he's in the two roles that he portrays on this list, these two different roles, which are both investigators of a sort, could not be more different. The nuanced acting performance, I mean, he never ceases to amaze me with that kind of talent. Guy Pearce and Kevin Spacey also just make up an incredible trio in this film. So it's absolutely worth seeing if you missed it the first time. It's just a great, fascinating movie, but you got to pay attention.
You do.
You're watching it with your teenagers, which I think is fine. It's a little violent, but it's not, keep you up at night afterwards violent. They got to put their phones away or they're just going to lose the thread. So
yes.
But it's a great film.
So our following film, I'm a little excited about, Deb, because first of all, I don't know how I missed this when this movie came out in 2005, but it is a film called Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and it's a film by Shane Black, who was the creator of Lethal Weapon. And this film stars Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer.
This is a movie that a lot of people missed, and I'm not sure why. Much like the other Shane Black movie on this list, it has a little bit of not a forgettable name, but a name that you might be mixing up with other films. I don't know that.
I did, because I was surprised. I thought it was an older film, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Yeah, and then there was another British film that had a little bit of a similar title. Anyway, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is the kind of movie that sets you up right from the get-go with its sort of absurdity, and you get this kind of just go with it mentality right from the get-go. And Robert Downey Jr. is evading the police for a crime that just know that he's running away from the police, and runs into an audition where, after this sort of explosive moment of angst, the casting director thinks is method acting, when in reality it's frustration at his situation, and hires Robert Downey Jr. for a role where he takes him to LA, and he's going to be playing a detective in a film.
I'm laughing because I saw the part of the trailer that you're referring to. That's hilarious.
It's the insanity of it. And then to prepare him for the role in the film, the producers send him to a private investigator who's played by Val Kilmer, who is a flamboyantly homosexual private eye. Fantastic. Right there, you've got me hooked. And Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer then proceed with what should be a fairly routine. You think the life of a private investigator is always glamorized in film, but in real life it's a lot of following around cheating husbands or whatever. Of course they get caught up in this incredibly complicated, I can only describe it as noir comedy as opposed to black comedy. It's this just bizarre series of events with this guy who's Robert Downey Jr., who really is just this sort of guy on the street who's been pulled into this whirlwind, and the whole story is told from his point of view as he's recounting the events that happened in the film at a party. And so I don't want to parse the minutia of the plot too much because it's just a lot of craziness. And I think it's better to just say, watch the movie, enjoy this movie. It's violent. It's a little, not a lot of men left standing at the end, let's just say.
Got it.
And, but it's really a crazy ride.
You know, we always talk about on this show about co-stars who don't get along behind the scenes. But I was happy to find out that it was the exact opposite between Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer. They got along splendidly during filming. They actually had met for the first time during a party in Hollywood. And then about a week later is when Val Kilmer read the script, immediately accepted without even finishing reading the script. And then a bit later on found out that Robert Downey Jr. was already cast in the film. To his delight, he was pleasantly surprised. Even during filming, I understand, in support of Robert Downey Jr.'s recovery from alcoholism, Kilmer did not drink during the entire length of production to show his solidarity. So, you know, it was kind of neat to hear.
That's great. And, you know, especially after you told the story of Top Gun, when Val Kilmer did not want to, was contractually obligated to play that role of, I think it was Iceman, right? Was he Iceman?
Yes.
And didn't want to, and didn't get along with Tom Cruise. So it's amazing what 20 years in your career takes.
True. True.
But,
and then we mentioned the director, Shane Black. You know, Robert Downey Jr. was reportedly so grateful to director Shane Black for casting him, and in his opinion, really put him back on the Hollywood A-list with this movie, that he campaigned for Black to be involved in the Iron Man
3, right.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And I love, love, love Hollywood stories like that.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And so it was following the success of Iron Man 3 that Shane Black went on to direct our next film, which is The Nice Guys. And it is starring Russell Crowe, once again, and Ryan Gosling.
And again, this is the same, if you liked Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, you will love The Nice Guys. And The Nice Guys, again, falls victim to that same problem with the title. You think, The Nice Guys, I've seen it. It's with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. Nope, that was The Other Guys.
The Other Guys.
I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 films with very similar titles that this one really kind of dipped under people's radars. And this film,
it's hilarious, Debbie. I enjoyed this movie.
It is hilarious. And I mean, first of all, you say, I've got a movie and it stars Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. They're sitting in chairs on a park bench for 2 hours feeding birds. Okay, I'll watch it. That's great. I mean, they are both so compelling on screen that they could do almost anything. And then this screenplay, which is this crazy story about a conspiracy theory within the auto industry and a dead porn star and I mean, it just goes, again, it's the same exact wormhole of a plot that Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is. And it's equally entertaining. It's not the same story, but they are very similar films in the way they're structured.
And for this one, you know, add to the fact that this movie was set in the 70s. And so it oozes that cool factor. And to see Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling in those 70s outfits, oh my gosh, what a treat. Such eye candy. I
have to say that kudos to Shane Black for trusting these actors to deliver, giving them, because the banter in this film is top notch. There's top notch. There's I sound like Judge Smales. There's it's just a very, very entertaining film to watch, and you get this vibe, despite the complexity and violence of the film, that there's this underlying vibe of just sit back and enjoy this shenanigans, because it's just a really fun, interesting film.
It's a very playful film, and if you recall the opening credits, it's very cool. You know, it's really an homage to the decade, to the 70s. They even use Warner Brothers 70s logo in the film opening. And also, Kim Basinger is also in this movie. And she is credited, because it's supposedly set in the 70s, as introducing Kim Basinger. So it was very, very cool. And so this film has another example of this, another proof of that bromance between Shane Black and Robert Downey Jr. Downey is not in this film. Well, actually he is in an uncredited role, Deb. He was one of the dead bodies in the movie. This film had a body count of 15 bodies. So you'll have to watch and see which one he is. But, you know, that just goes to show about this relationship that was cemented between actor and director.
And there, I mean, yeah, there's a high body count, and it's creative.
It sure is. All right, so our next film just completely took everyone by storm, and it is from 2011, and it is The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Now, record scratch.
Yes.
This is okay, just to set the stage. I have read all the books. I have seen all the Swedish version of the movies, which star Michael Nyqvist and Noomi Rapace is the actress's name.
Yes.
And all of the American remakes, which star Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara.
Correct.
So I'm inundated with plot points and information on this. This is an incredibly dark film. It is absolutely a whodunit, though. The stage is set when the male protagonist, who's a journalist, who's in trouble, he's been sued for libel, and needs to get away from Stockholm, where the action is set to, goes to this remote Swedish island at the behest of a patriarch of a family who for his entire life has been tormented by his granddaughter, who went missing many, many years before. And he wants this journalist, who's played by Daniel Craig, to figure out what happened to this girl. Meanwhile, then you have the girl with the dragon tattoo, Lisbeth Salander, who has just a very painful history and present, which is, I mean, this film is not for young audiences. It's profoundly disturbing. There is rape and sodomy and torture and all kinds of very violent acts in the film. And she is entwined with this investigative journalist, the Daniel Craig character, through some research she's done. She's a hacker. And so she gets involved in this investigation of this missing girl on this island in Sweden. And together, the Daniel Craig character and the Rooney Mara character are working to figure out what happened to this girl all these years ago. And it uncovers a lot of very disturbing stuff. But again, it's a great whodunit at its base. You've got all the suspects living on this island, all these family members, and you just have to sort of watch the puzzle pieces as they slowly fall into place, with this hacker figuring out this computer information and this journalist figuring out the history of what happened. And it's a brilliantly constructed film. They are true to the novel to a fault. And in fact, the movie drags a bit as a result. They leave no detail out from the novels, which it could have stood with a little editing, in my opinion. But
the beauty of it, though, is that you did not have to read the novel or be familiar with, the series by Stieg Larsson to appreciate and enjoy this movie. Because you're right. I mean, it really definitely had a hint of the ominous throughout the film.
Yes.
And really kept you on edge.
Yes. And it's you're never content. Like, you can never just sort of sit back. There's always a moment. There's always someone in the woods or someone in the house. Like, it's a stressful film, but it's a smart film.
It is. It really is.
We should also mention David Fincher directs, which he loves this milieu of this dark.
Yes, he sure
current, and that sense of anxiety that pervades a film. He really is a master at taking advantage of that. So, yeah. You
definitely had that feeling throughout this film. So our next film is from 2014, also based on a novel. Gillian Flynn, the author of the novel of the same name, she also wrote the screenplay for this movie, and it is the movie Gone Girl.
Now, I have to say, I hate this movie. I put it on the list. I know, we're like, great, here we go. I put it on the list because it's a great whodunit. It really is. You've never thought, you couldn't have predicted whodunit.
Did you read the book?
I read the book cover to cover. And my gripe with the book is better. But has the same issue for me, which is there's no one to root for in the story. In the book, I think you do root a little bit more for the husband, the way the story's told. I don't know why.
It might be a little someone named Ben Affleck.
I'm talking about the book.
I know, but
right.
You see the movie.
And he's pretty. He is pretty. And he plays the dupe so well in this film. Like, I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying that. He is this sort of dumb guy who's letting other people steer his train. You know what I mean? And you get the sense of that from very early on in the film. But you don't know who or why or what, or if he, in fact, is instrumental in his wife's disappearance.
Okay, so would you be totally shocked if I told you that I think that this is Ben Affleck's best acting performance?
No, because I think it's probably close to, I don't think he had to try really hard. It was not a stretch for him.
Well, that's what I was thinking, Deb.
Right, totally. It's his.
You and I always talk about his acting prowess or lack thereof.
Yeah.
And so I've always thought that this movie, was the perfect role for him because the viewer is not supposed to know whether or not he did it.
I agree. And I don't think he's a bad actor. I think he's a good actor. But I just think that as long as he's staying in his wheelhouse, he can be great. And this is a perfect example of that. It's just suits him perfectly. It's
the best setup for him because, you can't tell when he's supposed to be trying to convince the investigators he didn't do it. I'm thinking he's such a bad actor. You don't believe him.
Right.
But, and so Ben Affleck, to prepare for this role, he talked about studying big cases that involved husbands who were accused of killing their wives. And one of those cases is the Scott Peterson case. And if you recall that case, he was accused of killing his pregnant wife, Lacey.
Mm-hmm.
And when that case was going on, Deb, I really thought if you've seen the pictures of Scott Peterson, Ben Affleck could
Yeah.
easily play him. They are so similar in appearance.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. All right. So we began this list with movies based on Dame Agatha Christie's mysteries. And so it is fitting to end it with a movie that is a complete homage to Agatha Christie. And that is the movie Knives Out from 2019. And Deb, this was the mystery surrounding the death of a wealthy mystery writer, Harlan Thrombey, who was found murdered the day after his 85th birthday. Dame Agatha died at age 85.
Now, I think it's a mistake to declare your film an homage to Agatha Christie because you've immediately set the bar too high. It kind of reminds me of, do you remember the movie PCU with Jeremy Piven? It's a 90s comedy.
Yeah.
Okay, but they build it as the Animal House of the next generation.
Which did not work.
Immediately like, okay, sure. Like, that's how you gotta feel about this. By the next Agatha Christie-esque film, okay, sure. Now this film is good. It's great, especially for like my kids who are a little bit older, who had no exposure to Agatha Christie or any really great kind of whodunit writers. Were blown away by this. They love that premise of the, just someone in this room killed Mr. Smith. Like, it's a very, very cool concept. And this one, they do it everything right. They set the stage. They give you the motives. They give you the opportunities. They have a few little glitches along the way. In my opinion, there are some big flaws in the script, but they're not so bad that you don't enjoy the film.
I agree.
For sort of more seasoned mystery lovers, I give it a 7. I think my kids would have given it a 9. You know what I mean?
And I'm somewhere in between because I think that the ensemble cast for this film, led by Daniel Craig, who was just so delectable, I thought, as Benoit Blanc.
Fantastic.
Benoit Blanc.
Kind of reminded me of Kevin Spacey in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. That kind of slow drip Southern, just detective with his
dripping with the sweetness of Southern iced tea.
He's great. I mean, really, he really dove into that role with aplomb, and I thought he was fantastic. And I think he could reprise that role as the sort of all-knowing, observant detective who sort of appears to be the kind of Southern, not, and it doesn't come across as dumb, but is not a slow thinker, let's say.
All right, so let me make
smarter than everyone else in the room.
Let me make your day right now, Deb, because for you fans of Benoit Blanc, a sequel has been announced.
Great. That's great.
We're told it's not really a continuation of the story of Knives Out. Rather, it continues the character of this debonair detective that we've come to love, and he is working on his next mystery. So it's been announced. We're not sure when production will begin, but that's definitely something to look forward to.
That's great. Yeah, because he absolutely has the makings of an iconic detective. So that's great. Yeah.
And I actually saw an interview with him talking about this role, and he's just talking about how much fun it was for him to really embody this role. And he was really key in coming up with that accent, which you said Kevin Spacey kind of reminded me of Colonel Sanders. But in a cool way for Daniel Craig to be doing it.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a believable accent. I mean, I'm always very picky about accents.
Yes, you're big on accents.
I'm the accent Nazi, and does a fine job. I mean, I've lived in the South, and he was believable to me. So,
Yes. So yeah,
And
there will be.
now we just need a Miss Marple, who is Agatha Christie's other iconic detective from her novels. So we've got Poirot, and I'm sure someone's cooking up that there's a Miss Marple in there ready to jump to the forefront.
Well, see, being an Agatha Christie fan, I'm gonna really have to, when you're talking about casting a Miss Marple, it has to be the right person, kind of the same way as you're casting Hercule Poirot. It just so happened that a lot of the actors have been cast, like Albert Finney in the original 1970s movies, and Peter Ustinov, and now Kenneth Branagh. They've really, really made the role their own, and we're quite pleased with the results. So yes, what a fun list. Of course, we shan't send you off without dessert, Debbie. And today we are presenting you with something new you can wow your family with for Thanksgiving, since that is coming up. And we are presenting you with a recipe that comes to us courtesy of New York Times. And we have for you pumpkin blondies with chocolate chips and pecans.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
And it's really good. We've done it at our test kitchens. Blondies, for those of you who are not familiar, they're like brownies, but not as chocolate forward. But that's all right, because for this recipe, we made sure that it has some chocolate in it. And it's so
I don't need the chocolate. I'm a huge Blondie fan. I love them.
Great. And this definitely, and I'm not that much of a pumpkin fan, but this one really is perfect because it's not very sweet. The flavor of the pumpkin really comes through. You get the sweetness from that chocolate, and it's wonderful, and it's perfect for Thanksgiving. So we will have the recipe for you, as always, on gazellemagazine.com. Deb, you are a pleasure, as always.
Thank you so much. I'm literally going back into the TV room, and I'm going to fire up one of these movies. Now I'm in the mystery mood.
There you go. And we hope that we all put you in a mystery mood with this musty movie list. And thank you for joining us. We will see you again next time. Bye.